So today we have François Régimbal and Éric Richard from CEGEP du Vieux-Montréal who will give us some context around health and well-being with regards to nutrition, talk about different issues in student populations, and they will propose action points that the educational institutions can take to help favorize solid nutrition among the students. Éric Richard is a prof in sociology at CEGEP du Vieux-Montréal and member of the Observatoire, the Observatory of Youth and Society, Observatoire Jeune Société. He has been teaching and doing research since 2005. His interests are around young people's experience around mobility, education, and living conditions. His work particularly looks at mobility, interprovincial mobility of students on the student population, the adult population, as well as questions of success and nutrition, well-being in the student population. François Régimbal is a prof at sociology at CEGEP de Montréal, who is the president of the Ethics and Research Committee. He has a doctorate in sociology that he obtained in 2022. His subject is nutritional well-being or nutritional health. He is a researcher and a member of the Centre de Recherche de Montréal on social inequality. He and discrimination and alternative practices for good citizenship, and that has been since 2013. He is also co-lead of Territory and Food Systems, a group. He talks about the importance of giving people a voice, people who are suffering from social inequality. If you're interested, there is the L'Épicerie, which is a show here in Quebec. There was an article on Eric and François' research and what they have found, and I'll send you the link to go see the show L'Épicerie that has a report featuring our two speakers. So I wish you a wonderful webinar, and I will hand it over to our speakers. Have fun, everybody. Hello, everybody. Thank you for taking some time today to come and hear about nutrition and well-being. And I just want to say that our work was done in collaboration with profs at CEGEP de Victoriaville and two students, Daniel Roy, which is at CEGEP de Vieux-Montréal, and he has participated in writing an article about sharing food and nutrition for student well-being, and Madame Nadon, who's also an ex-student, who is still a student now, and she was one of the main participants in the Pedagogy Collégiale Review. I want to thank AQPC for participating in and helping with our research and helping us give it some outreach. Eric? Your microphone is off. I wanted to avoid sound issues. I'll leave it open now. So Nicole earlier has already presented some of the elements of our presentation, so we won't spend a lot of time on that. But François will give us some context, a little bit about the genesis of our work around nutritional well-being, and then we will give you some context of certain issues related to CEGEP and college populations and their nutrition and the problems we had with our research that we faced. And François will give us a framework around 5 dimensions of nutritional well-being that we used as indicators and pillars of our research, and then we'll talk a bit about methodology, and then talk about our findings. So we will look at things around these 5 pillars of nutritional well-being so that this concept can be carried through and make sense with the data we will present. As I said earlier, we will also think about certain responsibilities and actions that can be undertaken by the stakeholders. François. So, as Eric said, we were talking about nutritional well-being, and we were interested in seeing how other researchers looked at this and defined this concept. So if you want to change slides, the first traces of these concepts was in the beginning of 2010, where they presented their work on a conference around consumer habits, and they wanted to talk about nutritional habits and well-being, and we tried to develop more of a global vision around nutrition. And as we will see, with looking at it through this lens, the concept of nutritional well-being is to try to understand the relationship between general health and performance of the students and nutritional accessibility and well-being. So if we look at this flow bubble chart, they will use 5 determinants to try and define nutritional well-being. So with the data around the distance to quality food, grocery stores, but also this can be analyzed in a conceptual way. We're interested in nutritional policies, food security policies in certain regions to see the impact on the health and well-being and mental well-being of the students. We're also looking at socialization around nutrition and what the students have learned around different cultures and social mores around nutrition and how it relates to the individual. We're also interested in competency in this area and interested in when they make decisions on what to eat, but also production, distribution, preparation of food, and conservation of food. So how these individuals use these skills when it is time to understand and define their relationship to nutrition and define this concept of nutritional health and the effects on general health of student populations. And since the 2010s, we see we have more of an emotional a rapport with food. So next slide. So when we look at the different definitional approaches of well-being, we can see the main lines of the approach that blocks a team adopted. So there we're looking at the relationship developed between the individual and nutrition on a psychological, spiritual, emotional level. And other research that we were interested in, that we looked at, is the hedonistic perspective. So the moment when people will consume food and the different perspectives. First is the hedonistic perspective, and so looking at how people will derive pleasure through food and nutrition independently of when it is when they buy the product, when they prepare them, or they consume them. And the other perspective is the eudaimonistic perspective, where we will look at how people, through their experience, how they will emancipate themselves and thrive. So we'll look at these different approaches, the notion of nutritional well-being, and how we use this to have a global view of certain populations and students face with regards to their nutrition and food habits, and better understand the distance between what has been done and what we are doing now to develop our own analysis, even if we follow the different concepts that we presented here. So I will hand it over to Eric, who will explain the context in which we conducted our research, but also to look at the relevance, the social relevance, and how it relates to our research. So with the framework that François presented, we wanted to drill down on what came out in the elements that came out in higher education around nutrition. So these are the elements that we present with regards to college populations, but post-secondary populations as a whole. So 5 points that define the research challenges we had. First of all, most of the work done on students with students in the post-secondary education with regards to nutrition show that food insecurity has a negative impact on learning, staying in school, success academically. Studies take longer, and there are risks of students quitting. So the research is pretty clear on that. Then the other thing we can see is that the student populations post-secondary are more vulnerable to food insecurity than the general population. For example, in Quebec, during the last survey the government did, we see that 15 to 16% of the population in Quebec that has food insecurity issues that are measurable. For our students in post-secondary education, these are proportions that are higher than the average population. We see that in the studies in the US, Canada, Australia. We see the same thing. We're going to talk about that in a moment. The other thing we can see is that the angle that is taken, generally adopted, is the angle of food insecurity that we look at in research. And the framework here that we present is more specifically the 5 dimensions of nutritional well-being. For us, it helps us to have a more global view, a high-level view of things. Food insecurity is like the tip of the iceberg of all these issues and the relationship between students and nutrition. So we have to have a wider view on things than just food insecurity. So before our research, to my knowledge, there was no research specifically around the question of issues relative to nutrition, food insecurity, post-secondary education. So this is a pretty rare endeavor. And for us, when we look at the multiple factors that can influence the educational perseverance and educational success, for us it's a dead zone. It's one of the dead spots, and we as educators don't really know much about this in general. So globally, also around all of this, holistically, we have to have this context of this transitional thing called CEGEP that we have in Quebec. So this transition from post-secondary to university, it's a very particular experience that's well documented in research. And what's interesting in terms of nutrition and food insecurity is that there are research projects in the US that shows that students who have food insecurity and nutritional insecurity in their educational experience have more of a prevalence in their adult life to continue to have these problems, food insecurity problems throughout their whole life, independently of their situation before post-secondary education. So there's an institutional effort to look at how we give the students better tools to deal with these issues. So I will hand it over to Francois for to explain how we look at nutritional well-being, a new way of looking at it. As Eric said, we wanted to have a new look, a new view on these issues. As Eric said, often in the literature, we look at issues of nutrition through food insecurity or food security. And we wanted to go from food security or insecurity and talk about nutritional well-being. So we're going to show that, and they use this concept across 5 dimensions, this nutritional well-being concept. And through looking at different issues, it really helped us to understand the relationship of populations with nutritional well-being. The other point is the question of well-being or nutritional unwellness or nutritional issues. So for us, there are population groups that have particular issues with nutrition. So we did research with, we looked at research with retired persons that have specific issues with nutrition, and the college population as well that has a specific situation with regards to nutrition. And then we wanted to look at those two populations, so that's what we've done. So the so we did a graphic representation, a kind of a conceptual cloud, where we see the individual in the middle and the five dimensions: material, body, temporal, relational, decision aspects. And for us, it's really interested in the material conditions that are the most important to nutritional well-being. But we also added the quality of spaces where the person lives. So that's important because in the research, these are things that came out very clearly. The quality of living spaces, cafeteria, installations that really encourage people to want to be there and eat there. So the material dimension is very important in the research. And as Eric said, it's just the tip of the iceberg. The other part is the bodily dimension, so physical health, mental health, but also the five senses that will be mobilized in consuming food. So in our research, we were interested in meals that are skipped or meals that are smaller or skimped on, and how they add to the stress of educational experience. So the relationship aspect is important. We look at two aspects here: the support system of the individual, and when they consume food, how they share their food with others, or if they eat alone, and this aspect of loss of appetite, because people are always eat alone, and they don't want to be seen eating alone, so that's a part of it. The other part is the time aspect. That's very important to understand the relationship with students and nutrition. So the importance that people will give to their nutrition depending on their past experience, present experience, and future. So in the research project, this dimension allows us to shine a light on this transition between high school and college that will be accompanied with a lot of life changes and different changes in how they do things and rituals and things and how they organize themselves, and how this contributes to their decisions and their autonomy and their food choices. This whole question of the tension between individual choices and their values and traditions and societal expectations that we're interested in is to see the interplay of all these elements, how they make their choices and develop certain autonomy with regards to nutrition. So these are the five dimensions through which the five pillars that we use to understand the relationship of college students to nutritional well-being. Nicole, are there any questions? For now, no, but I would have a question. The young people you're talking about, college and university, you talked a little bit about that, but are there issues to access to access quality nutrition before they get to CEGEP? Do we know anything about that? Are these student populations experiencing this before post-secondary? Unfortunately, we have not documented that. That was before the college experience in our research, so we didn't look at it. But ideally, we'd have to have a longitudinal study that looks at young people earlier on, before high school, and follow them throughout their educational career. But we haven't documented that yet. Okay, there's another question asked in the chat from Marie. Do you consider skipped meals for other reasons than the ones you've named? You said lack of money, don't want to eat alone, or for young people that follow a certain religions or certain sects, because these are data that you looked at. Intermittent fasting. Some people are training and they eat at different times, and it's a good question. We didn't ask this question. Do you skip meals for health reasons, for training, or religious reasons? We asked, why do you skip meals? And the elements that came out are those. So we will be able to look at that a bit deeper and discuss this in a few minutes. So you can continue. Thank you. Thank you for the questions. I will ask you to ask your questions in the Q&A tab and not in the chat. Thank you. So, a few words on our methodology to allow you to better understand how the knowledge we're sharing today, how the research was done. So, I'm going to go quickly here. Our research lasted 2 years. There's 3 data collection periods: qualitative, quantitative, and qualitative as well. For the quantitative part, it was in 3 CEGEPs: Vieux-Montréal, Victoriaville, Matane. Their recruitment was done, first of all, to ask students to fill out a diary for a week. So we recruited people. We asked them to fill out this daily log 3 times a day for a week. So every morning we would send a text or an email with their daily record to fill out. For breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Have you eaten? What did you eat? If the answer is no, then it would just stop. And if the person says yes, then what did you eat? Did you eat alone? Did you eat with others? What did you eat? People could even join a photo of what they've eaten. We also asked them to briefly describe the context in which they consumed the food. So there are different questions like that that allow us to document 588 instances of consuming nutrition. So that allowed us to have a rich basis to understand their food habits. The originality, the difference in what we're doing is the daily log, the journal, was a trigger for interviews with these people. So after 1 week of journaling their meals, we meet with them, and the daily log, the journal, was the basis for discussion. So the different dimensions of well-being through their experience of daily life, of consuming nutrition that they logged in their journal. So we don't necessarily remember what we ate 5 days ago, but the journal, the daily journal, allows us to look back and look at skipped meals and what they ate and why they skipped meals for different reasons. So we documented different elements with how it influenced their studies and college experience. We also looked at extending the data collection to 6 CEGEPs: Victoriaville, Vieux-Montréal, Matane, Garneau, Abitibi, Témiscamingue, and another CEGEP where a more detailed questionnaire, 2,000 plus students answered, 2,127, where we documented in a detailed way the different dimensions of nutritional well-being and measuring food insecurity according to Statistics Canada. We also documented the food intake of the day before. It's a mini journal just for 1 day, and then we looked at the satisfaction of students with regards to their students and how they're performing, and documenting different elements of their life, work, study balance, food. So to be able to look at these different elements and connect them with dimensions of nutritional well-being and general well-being. Nicole, are there any questions on the methodology? No, there are no questions on methodology, but there is a question that was asked earlier that I am just finding now. Sorry, Evelyn, I am a guidance counselor and I was a nutritionist. Will you collaborate with nutritionists during your research? She's asking this question. We, good question. We haven't elaborated our methodology with nutritionists. However, there's a lot of nutritionists with which we've had discussions once our research was done, especially in different conferences. So that brings us to look at it through different iterations. But one of the objectives is to look at food through a nutritional lens, as a nutritionist would do. And that's why we talk about food insecurity and why it is so important and essential to look at that. But we wanted to look at the other dimensions that are much less covered in the literature. Thank you. So we will go with the results. As I said earlier, we divided these results into five different parts with regards to the different dimensions. So first of all, the question of the material dimension around food insecurity, and not just a question of food insecurity, the material part of it, but it's something that is important. So we have to measure in our questionnaire some things to put into context. The tool that we used is the module from Statistics Canada on food insecurity, and it's a tool that allows us to translate and present the access to quality nutrition for certain populations, but also looking at the context of resources, economic resources, to be able to afford these nutritional quality meals. So we asked people in the last 3 months, did you fear lacking food because you didn't have enough money? Or in the last month, have you skipped meals because of lack of funds to procure nutrition? So these are always related to financial issues. This tool allows us to class people into 4 categories, to divide them into 4 categories. People who are in a food insecurity situation have issues with finances and access to quality food. People that are in this situation are in 3 different levels. People who are marginally food insecure, so fear of not having enough money to feed themselves adequately. There's moderate food insecurity. Those people are more, I will reduce my portions. I have less money. Sometimes I'll skip a meal because I don't have the money. And there's also extreme food insecurity, where really you're in a situation where you regularly skip meals, where we can spend a whole day without eating because of financial issues. So we looked at that with regards to the college population, and the results that we got are the following. We see here in the pie chart on the left that there's 44% of students in the 6 colleges that are in one of the 3 forms of food insecurity. As I said, in the general population, it's about 15-16% in each. It's 15% in the general population. We're 3 times higher. And it's the same in other countries, U.S., Australia. Students are a population that are vulnerable with regards to this. And we see that if it's marginal, moderate, or extreme, and the distributions are about equivalent, it's not just a food insecurity that is marginal. There's different categories. All 3 categories are equally represented, moderate or extreme. So also of note is in our 6 colleges, college where there's the least food insecurity was 34%. So it was the one that had the least. But these are numbers that are twice as high as the general population. It's 1 student out of 3. And in a college that had the most, we were at 56%. So we are at 4 times the general population. So it's a very vulnerable population. So what we could document in our research is there are profiles, different types of students that are different profiles that are more at risk. So you've listed them there on the right, the people who are non-binary, people who are older students, students who have children, international students, first-generation immigrants. When we compare them to their peers, the different categories, they are more numerous in having food insecurity issues. So the other analyses we've done is that when we compare these different profiles of students, some students are even more exemplary in this manner. They are more affected, people who are non-binary or trans, older students, and those who don't live with their parents. Those are the ones who are the most affected. So within these different populations, there are groups that are more vulnerable. And what we've done is these students are, with our research, has shown that these students are not as self-actualized, not as confident. They will be less satisfied with their studies compared to those who are in a food secure situation. They will feel more stress in their educational experience, and they feel less capable of concentrating on their work. And one thing we didn't expect, they've also said that they're less confident of finishing their studies. So that goes along with the rest of the results we found through our research. So I will now hand it over to Francois, who will talk about the temporal, relational, and bodily aspects. I missed a bit of your presentation, Eric, because my connection dropped. So you can cross the street and go to the other side if you want. The temporal, very important. The temporal dimension is to understand the relationship of students with nutrition. What we saw in the research, that our relationship to nutrition starts earlier in life around routines or rituals. Without getting too much into detail, it's rituals that we repeat in our lives, but that has a certain importance to people. For the CEGEP population, the transition between secondary school and CEGEP requires more organization and better time management. So when we talk about their relationship to food, they would compare with their past experience when they were in high school. And when I was in primary or high school, what they would say is the schedule is pretty fixed. It's always the same, and it was compatible with family life, with friends. I always ate at the same time with the same people, with the same in the same spot, and so this was something that was completely different when they got into CEGEP. And what they said was schedules are always different, and it's not always compatible with their friends and their family and their schedule and when they eat, and especially in the morning. So their routine is completely changed, and this temporal displacement has an impact on their relationship to nutrition, will affect their appetite, their capacity to organize meals, and everything related to changing schedule and times where they are very busy, deadlines they have to meet, and so they don't always have time to eat meals. They have sometimes a lot of work to do for their classes. Sometimes their schedule is so full and they're so tired when they get home, they barely ate all day. So what some people even said to us is they feel a bit abandoned by their educational institution. It's like, figure it out for yourself. And we don't have time at our CEGEP to eat. I have classes from 10 to 6, no break. And except for the few minutes of break we get during class time. So there's no specific time set aside for meals with their friends who sometimes have completely different schedules. Francois, I'm sorry, we don't see you. And I have three questions, but we can wait before taking those. Okay. Should I continue, even if you don't see me? Yes, you can continue. Okay. So, worst case, I can meet Eric in the room next door and connect from there. So, there's also travel between going from class to class, and traveling can also contribute to these issues. Sometimes students are 3 hours a day traveling around, and that can have an effect on the time they can allocate for meals. And really, the work that they have to do for their studies, their studying time also contributes. They're so concentrated and they are so crunched for time sometimes that they have no time for anything except studying and doing their classwork, and that's when they will skip meals, and there's this temporal displacement, this temporal issue that they are facing. Another important dimension is the relationship dimension. We talked about this with the different tools, methodologically, the daily journal, for example. When we look at these tools, we see that if it's 50% of the people who eat alone, that was striking. We didn't expect that. But the more we think about it, it may not be so abnormal. A lot of the population eats by themselves as well. So what was particularly striking in eating solo is during lunch at college. We expect that to be a moment of collegiality, of socializing, where we share our experiences and network and talk to other students. We saw in the questionnaire that 50% of the people eat alone in college for lunch. When you eat with others, members of your family, friends, colleagues, that is a positive experience. It's not surprising. And so in certain CEGEPs, they tried to counter this isolation by organizing collective meals. So it was a once a month or twice a month thing, but they liked it so much that in some CEGEPs it became a daily thing. And even in certain cases, it helped with the economic situation because people would share food. Everybody would bring food, and the people who could not bring food would participate in preparing the meal or doing the dishes or cleaning up. And so it allowed certain groups of students to share and reduce economic equality and have collective meals together. So, talking about the bodily dimension, according to our data, what the journal shows is 21% of meals were skipped. When we look at the questionnaire, there's a mini journal of the preceding day of completing the questionnaire. We looked at that. And 39% of respondents who said that they ate 2 meals a day. And we asked them to, in the last 3 months, have you skipped meals? And 35.5% of the respondents said, I never skipped a meal in the 3 last months. However, what's interesting for us is those who skipped meals, we asked them why. And in this context is 8.4% who said they skipped meals because of lack of funds. That's interesting because it's a small proportion who say they skip meals only because of lack of funds, as defined by food insecurity definitions. 12.9% is because of lack of funds, but also for other reasons. Very interesting, to understand the importance of the bodily dimension. So 43% say it's for other reasons than lack of funds. So that's very important for us because it allows us to see an important part of the students that skip meals are for other reasons than lack of funds. And as we mentioned earlier, overload of work and also for bodily reasons, health reasons. Many said they have ADHD, where they have less appetite in many cases where they will skip meals. And there's the relationship aspect as well. People who said they were lonely were not able to have a good support network, and they are in a kind of form of depression where they have less appetite and don't feel like preparing meals and will skip meals. So some people said they don't want to eat at college because they don't want to be seen eating alone. Some people told us that. A lot of people told us that. That was striking. One person said his parents prepare the lunchbox. He goes to CEGEP at lunch. They eat alone. They prefer not to eat, and rather than being seen eating alone. They don't want to be seen as the loser who eats alone. Maybe also another thing is we made the decision to not question the population, the student population directly around food issues, food illnesses, related illnesses, like bulimia, for example. So we didn't look at that issue. Many people mention it on the questionnaire that it's an important issue, and in the interviews as well. This is something that came out with the bodily dimension of food insecurity. And finally, we're going to talk about the decision-based dimension of this. I will let Eric take over now. So we used, I will put this up on the screen because I want to add something to it. The decisional part of it, is the question of the autonomy of the person in their nutritional choices. So in the questionnaire, we decided to look at certain elements that are of a certain interest. So there's this question of meal consumption, how they are delivered, how they're consumed, DoorDash and food delivery options. And we also questioned people as to do they get food delivered? So compared to the week before, did they get food delivered? 3/4 of the people questioned said they didn't order food delivered to their house in the last week. 26% twice or more. So it's a service that is used. What's interesting is the people who are in a residential situation, who are not with their parents, who have some nutritional issues, are more inclined to get food delivered. They maybe have a material issue with regards to their food security, but they get more food delivered. So there's this whole question of their competencies and skills to make meals, organizing, meal planning, and buying their food and all of that, all these elements that feed into that. There's also people that are in a very good financial situation. They have less food delivered. So those who have a problem with financing, they will get more food delivered. So it seems counterintuitive, but when we look at the data and the interviews, what we see is the question of lack of organization that explains, I have no time, I get things delivered, etc. So there's that element that you have to keep in mind that we look at. And then the other results are with regards to the institutional responsibility, with regards to the decisional aspect. So the food offering at CEGEP, we questioned the students to see what was offered to them in CEGEP in college, in terms of food. Does it meet their expectations? Is it quality? Do they find it affordable? So the numbers speak for themselves. More than 50% of the students sampled are unsatisfied with regards to the food choices and affordability. The also knowledge of the different options that they have. We ask them if they have difficulty in obtaining quality nutrition. Do you know where to go? What are the resources? 70% said no. So this whole question of educating people around the resources available where they need certain services and they're not aware or they don't have the information. We often have to repeat these things so that the information percolates. So we did an analysis at the end of the questionnaire. We had some open-ended questions where we asked the students, if you have suggestions or recommendations for us to improve food security in your CEGEP, in your college. And there's Madame Gagnon, a student who did an analysis of this. I've been doing research a long time, and I had never seen so many students give comments that were so elaborate and so detailed. And Elodie did an analysis of this, and very quickly, what came out of it very quickly is around the question of autonomy and their capacity to make decisions with regards to their nutrition. The first thing is lower the prices at the cafeteria. I want to be able to make choices. I want to be able to afford things, but the prices are too high. Parallel to that, the suggestion they make in a very small proportion with regards to the interviews we have is the free food, the opportunity to get free food. They don't want that. They want to take charge of their own nutrition in a context where affordability is coherent to their means. They want a better offering, a better variety of nutrition. They want time to be able to eat. That came out a lot around the time aspect of it and the infrastructure for meals and nutrition in CEGEPs and colleges, and also having access to information around nutrition. There's Francois who is having had issues with his connection, and he's here with me now. Yes, we can take questions, of course, as you wish, because it's very interesting what you've presented. Thank you for the quality of the presentation. Wonderful presentation today. And I wasn't aware of all of this, and I learned a lot, so I really appreciate your presentation. So the questions that were asked, we'll go with the oldest. Did you consider First Nations students in your research? Unfortunately, not specifically, because in recruitment for candidates, there were no First Nations students that volunteered. And in the questionnaire, it's a question we asked for self-identification, but the number of respondents that said that they were First Nations was so low that we couldn't do anything. We didn't have a sample size. But we see in the literature that it's a population that is vulnerable. There's André Baudin-Lecourt. I want to salute her. Why the non-binary and trans people are more at risk? Why? That's a good question. We don't have any answers to that. Hypotheses only, but the hypothesis is there are populations who are more discriminated against, more marginalized, more isolated. So it's not surprising that they are people who will have more food insecurity and more issues with regards to nutrition, and this question of discrimination is always there. There's Corinne Marois, who asks the question, what if we had mandatory lunch at colleges? Are there CEGEPs that you spoke to that had a lunch hour that was designated? or was it a free form like in most CEGEPs? Well, this question is difficult because it's not everybody that was aware if there was a blackout for lunch or not. Even the teachers, sometimes in certain CEGEPs, they were convinced that there was a time designated for lunch for the students, and some of the teachers did not know that there wasn't, and they wanted some of the teachers wanted to know why there was no lunch hour for students. So sometimes with the schedule of students, they have no time for that, and so the teachers are very well placed to tell us if we should have a designated lunch hour. But CEGEPs didn't identify that as an important thing, and it's one of the things that came out in many of the interviews as being an issue. Thank you. And there are other questions here. Do you want to take them? Yes. Can we just give you a quick conclusion? Yes, quickly. Perfect. So, what I wanted to talk about in our conclusion is our research on well-being, nutritional well-being, is the lens of food insecurity. Was reductionary in terms of identity. We see population as food, mouths to feed only, and that makes it so that the answer we will give to this issue is a charitable one. And the problem is a problem of access. We think that's what it is, and we'll give food. But as we see with the 5 dimensions of nutritional well-being, it's not always related to, and sometimes it's for other reasons. Rather than just financial. So we should look at these different dimensions when we want to give support. The other element is that this tool of the 5 pillars of financial of nutritional well-being helps us to understand the relationship with certain populations with their nutrition and use it as a guide to evaluate the best practices for nutritional support we can have. Maybe, okay, I have a food bank, but what dimensions are we responding to? The material dimension, the bodily dimension, probably relational, no. It's not positive or negative, but for a decisional, it could be negative. So it allows us to look at certain initiatives, even though they have good intentions, can generate some issues with regards to food security and nutritional well-being. It's a tool to help us understand, but also to measure or evaluate the different practices we want to put in place with regards to nutritional well-being. Thank you. Other questions? I'm going to skip one. Marie, I'm going to come back to you. There's Alicia who is asking 2 questions. Talking about charity, the decision to receive charitable donations. These students don't want to receive free food baskets, for example. She's asking that question. Would the students like to receive food baskets? It's a good question. It's not that they don't want to be helped. Some of them, yes. That came out a lot. There are some students who said we are in a society where there is a war on autonomy. So for a lot of students, I have my first experience as an autonomous person who leaves the nest, and I don't want to ask for charity right away. I want autonomy. I want to have a space, some tools, some time to cook, some resources to help me know what to buy and what to cook. And so rather than having charity, a lot of people say, I know the resources in my CEGEP for food banks, but it doesn't meet my needs. That's not what I need. That's not what I'm looking for. That said, it could meet the needs of certain people. In terms of food, I don't say we should get rid of that, but maybe it should be part of a basket of services, a more complete range of services and support that we have in place, where that is one part of the toolbox we have in CEGEP. So the cultural aspect, was it evaluated? Sometimes kosher or halal that are not accessible, etc. Yes, for us, this is part of the dimensions. We can include that in the relational part, but also in the decisional aspect of it. So, yes, it's culture is a part of it. We looked at that. People have mentioned it as well. that especially for international students that go to certain CEGEPs, they find themselves facing food choices with food they don't know at all. So it's a steep learning curve. What is this food? I've never had it before. So there's a whole education with regards to new types of food. That's something that came out a lot with international students. And also, as I said during our presentation, the relationship to food is built around rituals and routine and habits. So not having access to food we are habituated in consuming creates malaise and discomfort. I miss this kind of food or that kind of food or this kind of dish, and when I have access to eat this dish or my mom's cooking, it connects me to my culture, my heritage, and my family through meals. Thank you. There's a question from Marie. In your interviews, are there students who talked about knowledge with regards to nutrition, for example, different CEGEP programs that are related to nutrition, but also hotel management? We talk about food insecurity and the problems faced by their clientele. Are there students is there a relationship with the area of study and food insecurity? Well, the students didn't draw this parallel between what they're learning in CEGEP and their skills. That said, we question them on their perception of their nutrition skills, their cooking skills, their food skills. So generally, people feel competent. In the interviews, there were people who said, I don't feel competent, I don't feel ready. One of the reasons I don't want to go live on my own is I don't know how to cook. I don't know how to deal with meals. I don't know how to do any of that. It came out qualitatively, but it didn't come out a lot in the questionnaire. In the questionnaire, there was a general question where we asked them to evaluate their feelings with regards to their cooking skills. And there were very high scores where they feel very competent. But there are some questions where we put them in situations where we said, if you have an ingredient list and the necessary material, will you be able to make this meal or that meal? We had 5 examples that were of increasing difficulty, and we saw that the more difficult dishes, people felt less competent. So when we asked people, do you feel competent? Do you feel confident? When we put them in certain situations, and that's just a questionnaire, already we see that their answers are different, that they're not that confident. So in real life, it may be different than in the research. So those are the questions that were asked. It was very interesting. And very interesting that you talked about nutritionists and different dimensions of research. A huge thank you for your presentation today. The questions that were asked will be in the chat because it can serve as inspiration for all of us to see the questions asked by our participants. And for the participants and for Richard and Eric, thank you. It was very interesting. Thank you very much. See you soon. Thank you.